Sensationally silver, because you are.
Welcome, everyone, to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age, people who are going to bring you information, inspiration, and validation. Join us. Welcome, everybody, to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age. My guest today is Joe Valencia, and he has some extraordinary experiences to tell us about. He's someone I heard speak recently, and I thought, oh, I want him to come on my podcast and talk about what he's been through and the effects of that for him, and the effects of it on all of us in terms of the ideas we have about leaving the body and what that's all about. So, Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Robin. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And I'm just going to start out asking you my first question that I ask everyone. How old are you, Joe?
I'm 65, going on 66
Okay.
next month.
Okay. Oh, next month. Okay. Well, happy
Yes,
birthday in advance.
thank
All
you.
right. Um, and Joe, how old do you feel?
Well, I feel much younger than that. I feel like in my 50s, but there's some aches and pains I'm starting to get now, and I'm at the twilight end of my surfing career. I just can't stand up quite as quick as I used to. So,
Yeah, I understand. My son's a surfer too, and he's going to be 60 this next time. And yeah, it makes a difference, doesn't it? All those things.
it does.
All right. Well, how about if you just dive in and literally dive in and tell us your story?
Okay. Yes, some near-death experience, out-of-body experiences that I've had occurred many, many years ago. The first one was when I was 17 in 1976, January 76. And the second one, the near-death experience, occurred almost 2 years later in December 1977 when I was 19. So first, let me tell you about the first one. I was 17. I went surfing at Jalama Beach. I told my mom, there's big waves, Mom, I'm heading out. And like a mom, she was concerned, oh, don't go surf that. You're going to, please don't go, oh, Mom. So I dismissed her, drove to the beach. I probably should have taken a look at the waves. I knew they were big. It was an absolutely beautiful January day, uh, beautiful skies, beautiful color of water. And I didn't really stop to measure things up to get a good situational awareness and paddled out immediately without even getting my hair wet. But what happened is I had paddled out to during a lull when the waves were not breaking very large. Now I could notice that the water had been worked up by waves maybe a few minutes before, but I paddled out, and all of a sudden I looked out towards Point Arguello, and I saw these huge swells coming in. I mean, they were bigger than anything I've ever seen. And usually, when you see swells in a distance, they're not that far out. But this was 3 times further than I had ever seen swells start up. Big humps of blue water pumping, coming from Point Arguello. That's quite a distance away. My mind was trying to deal with this. What am I seeing here? What's going on? This is beyond anything I'd ever seen. Now, it took about 3 minutes before those waves started to get close because that's how far out they were. And in all my years of surfing, I've never seen anything quite like that. It was frightening and it was eye-opening, and I made another bad decision here. I decided to catch the very first wave, try to catch that in and get out of this situation. That seems smart to me. But what happened is I tried with all my strength and energy to catch this wave, and I just couldn't do it. It sucked out and broke, and I pulled back at the last second, kind of like pulling back on a horse's reins. and wheeled my surfboard around, and there it was, the second wave, bigger than anything I had seen. And I say 20 feet, but that's a rather conservative number. It was beautiful too. It rose up from the ocean and the wind began to hit a little bit and spray off that, and it was just quite beautiful wave. Um, and then it came and it crashed and it broke, and it was a delayed break where I heard it like a half a second later or so. But that wave came in, and here's where I made another bad decision. I couldn't really duck dive, which is going under the wave. And I turned around hoping that the wave would maybe got back on my board, hoping the wave would push me in, but it didn't. It was way too big for that. And it exploded with all that power and all of that energy. And it just drove me down into the bottom. And this is what's called getting worked in surfing, a bad wipeout, or you just get caught inside. It's called getting worked or getting uh, getting thrashed. Well, I felt my surfboard tear off my leg. The leash had broken, and now I'm all alone. And I was caught in this trench-like area where I wasn't getting sucked out to sea by the rips, and I wasn't getting pushed in. I was staying in a sort of vertical position, and each successive wave was just knocking me silly, pushing me down. I'm not getting air. I'm starting to get cramps from the 55-degree water, and I swallow water. And you don't want to swallow water. Okay, it's a mistake. That happens. But the next wave, I got pushed down again, and I was just dying for air and must have come up and opened my mouth, and more water came in. That's bad. I was getting weak. It was getting worked. It was hard. Uh, then another wave came, and this one pushed me down. And this time I came up, and I took in a lot of water, a lot, all the way. I could feel it going down into my belly and filling up my belly. And I go, my God, how did I let this happen? I wasn't panicking. I was certainly getting worked by these waves. The power was more powerful than anything I had experienced before. And I knew I was losing this battle. And then a voice came in my head, and I don't know where it came from, because it said, uh, just go quiet. What? What? I couldn't believe that. I don't, you know, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. Is that follow this order? And immediately when that happened, I left my body and I traveled upwards, and I traveled to a place right over where I lived in Lompoc. I was hovering about 100 feet in the air, and I had dreams about flying when I was younger. And I thought, is this a dream? Where I was flying, I could see the neighborhood, the trees, the cars, the backyards. Then I caught wind of a car driving up. It drove down the street, turned on our street where I live, our house, and it pulled over. And two men got out of the car. They walked up the driveway. They looked like officials of some kind, and they knocked on our front door. So I started to descend and watch this a little closer. And then I descended into the house, but there didn't seem to be a roof. I was like 10, 12 feet above watching this. Uh, and the two men came in. My parents, my mom and dad, welcomed them in. And my mom sat on the couch. My dad was behind her. And I thought to myself, I wonder if somebody's got in trouble, someone of my family members, or something like that. I wasn't beyond getting in a little trouble sometimes. I was very young. But nonetheless, I started to see what they were telling my mom and dad. And all of a sudden it hit, and I realized what they were saying. And I just stood there and I looked down and I said, no, or no, no, I cannot let this happen. I believe they were telling my parents that I had drowned at Jalama Beach. That's what I believe they were telling them. And I said, no, I can't let this happen. God, please help me. And next thing I know, I was back in my body. and back in my body, back in the ocean. Where my body was doing at this time is strange. Was I underwater? I don't know. But all of a sudden, I realized what had happened, and I knew that I had to get out of this situation. I was vertical, bobbing up and down like a cork, getting hit by these waves. And where this idea came from my brain, from myself, perhaps from somewhere else. But I thought that the best thing to do was to go horizontal and twist and turn with the wave action. Use the momentum of the wave to push me in and rotate as I'm getting pushed. So as each successive wave hit me, I rotated with it and used my feet, my hands as best I could to rotate out of this. And it did push me in. It pushed me out of this deep trench that I was involved in. And eventually I could feel the sand with my feet. And now I just body surfed the wave in. I swam as far as I can. Oh, it was such a relief. I could now feel the bottom and walk in and use the waves to push me in. And I crawled up on the sand. And I remember a guy came down, a young man from the dunes. He had watched the whole thing. I'm sure it was scary for him to watch. And he said, "Man, I can't believe what I saw. Are you okay?" And I responded very eloquently by throwing up all that water onto this beautiful, glistening beach with the late afternoon sun hitting colors off it and everything. And he helped me up, and I turned around. He says, "I'm going to go grab your surfboard." And he grabbed my surfboard, and I just stood there with my hands on my hips and just looked out the ocean. It was calm now, calm after all that I had been through. Another lull. Well, I drove home and I walked in the front door. I have no idea what it looked like, but my mom scolded me. She said, "See, I told you not to go surfing." And I don't know if it was my look or whatever, but uh, I knew that I had been very lucky in that situation.
Yeah.
So that was my first out of body experience, near death experience.
And you didn't tell anyone about those kind of esoteric details, the ones that people didn't really talk about in those days, right?
That's right. You just don't bring it up. You're young. You don't bring those types of things into your friends' conversation. You don't get deep with, because I was only 17, but it did happen, and you kept it inside, and you just don't talk about deep things like that. You don't know what your friends would say. "Oh, you're nuts. You're crazy," or something like that. So I just kept it in for many, many years. Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. And then,
And then there's another one equally as strange, but this occurred 23 months later. I was almost 2 years, December 20th, 1977. I was a firefighter working for Santa Barbara County Fire Department. I had been a hot shot and a reserve that season. So I was really immersed into the fire business, and I was very wanted to be a fireman. And December 20th, we thought the fire season was pretty much over, but nature had something in store for us, a big final ending to the fire season, which had been pretty bad. Sycamore Canyon, Kachuma Fire, uh, the Marble Cone, big surf fires. All of a sudden, the weather patterns, high pressures and low pressures, converged, and we had a perfect storm situation here in California, from Mexico to the Oregon border. Southeast winds blowing out, Santa Ana type situation blowing out. So we responded to the fire. And I remember as I responded towards Space Launch Complex 5, I saw the fire come over that ridge. And I saw it. It was burning so quickly, and I saw these beautiful colors like an explosion. And it was many years later that I found out that these were true explosions of 105 millimeter artillery shells that were exploding from the fire. Because Vandenberg Air Force Base used to be called Camp Cook, an Army base, and Patton's Third Army trained there. and the 40th Infantry Division, trained there before going to Korea. And I know that because my dad was in the 40th Infantry in the artillery division. So he probably put some of those shells up there, but they were exploding. And when I saw this, I thought to myself, be calm, cool, and collected, because I knew I was heading into something. So all of a sudden I saw deer run out in front of us, deer and coyotes and rabbits run out in front of us, and we were overrun by the fire. A few moments later, I couldn't believe what I was saying. I saw a brush truck heading up the opposite direction. It was my captain, Captain Simmons. It was another captain and another fireman going to an obvious rescue. And they came back, and there was a fireman on the back of the brush truck. And I ran over and I got the inhalator bottle and the first aid kit and ran over. And an ambulance came, and Captain Simmons looked straight at me and says, Valencia, go with the burn victim. So I got in the ambulance with the burn victim. His name was Clarence McCauley. He was a bulldozer operator for the fire dozers on Vandenberg Air Force Base. He was burned terribly. We got in the ambulance. There was a medic in the back. This was the old station wagon type ambulance. We got in the back, and the driver started going down the road, and we're tending to him, trying to give him an IV. I poured a water saline solution on him, trying to get the fire out. We took off his back brace, and all of a sudden the driver slowed down. Well, why is he slowing down? And I looked in the rear view mirror, and I could see his eyes. They were so big. And then I could see the flames going across the hood of the ambulance. And next thing I knew, we were entrapped, completely engulfed in fire. And the fire was hitting the windows of the ambulance. And I thought that the winds were so strong that I thought initially that it was going to whip us off the road. Uh, the fire was like being in a car wash, where the brushes are hitting the car and the water's hitting the car with such speed. It's whipping and just hitting so hard. It's like a Gemini spacecraft re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. So this is Lompoc. There's a train near here. So anyway, we're entrapped in fire at this point. All of a sudden, the rubber window sills began to burn, and I told the guys inside not to panic. I told the driver to call in that we're trapped and we need assistance. Um, all of a sudden, the weather stripping began to burn, and little gaps began to form, and little globules of rubber material began to fall all over. And I had leather gloves from my turnouts, and I put these fires out on the seats and on the all over the place, and tried to get those out. Because of the fire entering the ambulance, I thought, hey, let's turn off the oxygen, on the burn victim. Uh, the burn victim let out a real sorrowful cry, and it really got to me. And for a second, I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh, we're going to die." And then all of a sudden, I popped out of my body, and I was looking down on the scene from the back of the ambulance. I could see myself. I could see the burn victim, the medic who's given him an IV at this time, the driver. And I'm looking down and I'm saying, what am I doing here? And next thing I know, I'm in a completely black uh, atmosphere, and I seem to be out of my body. I have no idea. I was looking down at my body, and now I'm out of it. My whole spirit and consciousness and was in a place of complete darkness. And I seemed to be there for a while. And I thought to myself, did I die? Am I gone? Did I die? Um, and then I began to see this light way off in the distance, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it looked like it was full of energy as it got bigger and bigger. Uh, and all of a sudden, I saw images of my family, uh, and they were in picture frames. And the picture frames were very nice, like you'd see in a museum. And the picture frames were real. They weren't pictures, they were actual image, my family. my father and my mother, and they went across my field from right to left, and each one picture frames went from right to left. And that was my family, who I loved so dearly and loved so much. And all of a sudden, the light got bigger, and it was so beautiful. The white light was like white cumulus clouds, so beautiful against a blue sky. And it seemed to be like three major forms, but I didn't see any detail. It was just beautiful, beautiful, glorious light. And I knew that in my heart that this was the light of God. I just knew that in my heart, what I was seeing. But being in the situation that I was in, uh, I don't know why I spoke up. And like I say, I don't know if I spoke in words or through telepathy or what, because I wasn't in my physical body. But I said, "Dear God, dear Lord, please help me. Please help me do something here. Try to go back and do something to save our lives." I said, "I'm a fireman. It's my job. It's my duty. It's my responsibility. Please give me a chance to go back." And I repeated it. I said, "Lord, it's my duty, it's my responsibility to try to do the best I can to save these people. And it's not just me, it's them also." I said, "If we don't make it, I'll understand. I'll understand." And immediately, boom, I was back in my body. I was back in my body, and I was out of this area. And I'm thinking to myself, "Oh my God, we're in, we're involved in this huge fire that's overtaking us. What are we going to do?" So immediately I said, "Don't panic, you guys. We're going to get out of here," even though I had no specific plan. I looked out the front. It was too much fire. I looked out our side. Too much fire hitting us. In fact, the windows could break at any second. And I told the guys not to panic. And I told them that we were going to make it out. I looked out the windows, and I looked out the rear window, and I saw that this was the opportunity. I could see the white lines of the road. And so I told the driver, "Follow the white lines. We're gonna back up." And we backed up, and we made it out of there. And it was just a miracle that we did. We turned it around, and we were able to go back to our strike team. And I ordered a engine and brush truck escort out of there. And so we were able to get the burn victim to the hospital. And so that was my second near-death experience.
And Joe, again, did you tell anybody?
Not for many years. It was uh, after the fire. Most of the people were interested in what happened to the base commander, the fire chief, the assistant chief, and the bulldozer operator I was with. Uh, Most of the people were worried about what happened with these people that happened that they were overrun and killed in that fire. Um, but all the other people, we weren't, nobody cared about us, and we were just sort of the official report was mostly about what happened to those people who were killed, the base commander and the fire chief and such. And so I think it was kind of tucked under the rug. My captain said after the fire, "Just learn from the past and move on." And it was again, it was it was just move on. It was in those days there wasn't much that went on with those types of things. But I think I really was affected by that fire. It was a pivotal point in my life, and I uh, but I kept it under under my skin, under my personal. I didn't tell anybody. I just didn't tell too many people. However, I did want to talk to a therapist one time, not a therapist, but a pastor, but I never did. And so it just went on until a certain time, 7.5 years, when it all got triggered back, and I decided to write about it. And I wrote a book about it, and then I wrote another book about it, and then we did a film about it called Firestorm 77. So that has really helped me. And I think it's helped many of the other firemen who were at that fire that were kind of forgotten about. Uh, there was at that time augmentees that were called out to the fire. These were airmen that had no fire training at all. They were thrown out into the fire. So there was a lot of people from the Air Force and from Santa Barbara County and from other agencies that were there that were deeply affected by this, security, police, and so forth. So I think these books and I think this film really helped a lot.
But that was at the level of the fire itself. That wasn't that wasn't the part that was so unique to you, the out of body experience. So
Yeah, and I kept
that
it.
part of the trauma you got to share with some people after you worked on the book and the film and so on. But this other, for want of a better phrase, forgive me because it's so diminishing, but kind of the woo-woo part, that still stayed inside, didn't it?
It did. It's not until just a couple weeks ago when I spoke at the Ions in 2024 in August, and you were there, that I spoke about it, and and I'm speaking to you now about that. Uh, and I wrote about it a little bit in my book, but not to the detail that I had just said. I saw images of my family, before, but I never went into the detail that I had seen the lights
Yeah.
and what was there in the darkness. There was light that came out, and I know that. So I kept that quiet for many years, and
Joe, it reminds me so much of that that scene in Terms of Endearment. Jack Nicholson is the astronaut, and he's obviously got a drinking problem, and he says, "I wish we could just sit in a room together and talk about what it was like," because he and these other astronauts have had this experience that nobody else on Earth in all of history had ever had. It was such a unique and defining experience. And you got the sense of the loneliness that came from that because he couldn't share it. So now you've kind of stepped into another phase of your life because you are talking about this. And I'm assuming that maybe you've listened to some other people speak about similar experiences. I think people kind of started talking about this in the 80s. I remember hearing Kenneth Ring, he came to speak in Santa Barbara, and he talked about near death experiences. And I'd never heard the phrase before, but he was researching that and giving it some legitimacy because he was a scientist. Somehow these things need to be legitimized by science or nobody believes that they've happened. But is that changing for you, that kind of, because I'm assuming that kind of loneliness in that experience, not the firefighting part, that's so traumatic, but this is another dimension of it.
yes, boy, that word is perfect. Loneliness. To to not be able to tell your story and for all these years and focus just on the fire itself and not the experience, the supernatural near death experience that you went through. Yes, it was a lonely experience, but after seeing so many YouTube videos now that exist about it and so many books and people coming out and talking about it, that helped me to say, hey, it's time after two books about this fire and a documentary film, and the film brings out the PTSD that we never knew existed in all of us. That was one thing my book doesn't really care. So all of a sudden now, I'm I'm going the next step by talking about this near death experience, and it's an enlightening experience to finally talk about it and not deny it. I don't think when you see and you speak to the light of God, and why should you be quiet about something like that? And so I feel enlightened that I'm doing that now. And I know that a lot of people go through a lot of things and suffer and such, and that's what gives us endurance to make it through that. And that endurance helps us and builds character in us, and that character gives us hope. And the hope is God's love poured into our hearts. And people have gone through many things, such as cancer or the loss of a loved one, and so many things. But for me, at a young age, to go through that, not just the fire itself, like you said, but the near-death experience, and not to be able to talk about it. My parents are both gone. I never spoke to them about it. It was just the ethos of those times. You carry on and you
Yeah.
just move forward. And so I don't feel, but there's now this IONS group that talks about these things. And so it was really wonderful to talk about that a couple of weeks ago. And
It really is a support group. Yeah. So I kind of would like to close with this, Joe. For anybody who's listening or watching and who maybe is at the end of their lifetime, maybe they know that they're going to be leaving that body soon, or maybe they love somebody and it's that time's coming very close when that loved one is going to be out of that body. What would you say to them, having had this experience of leaving the body, seeing the world from this completely different perspective, and then seeing this light? Do you have something to share with people who are maybe facing that?
well, I do believe there's another dimension. Maybe there's even more than that. Uh, but I'm in this reality right now, in this physical form on Earth. But for a moment in time, twice, I saw different realities. Because we can't fly or float, and our consciousness leaves our body. So that's a different realm, a different physics there. There's something out there, a different dimension. And I know this one really good, and I've seen just a little bit of the other one. And I do honestly believe that when we die, we go to that other dimension. And perhaps there's even more after that. Because remember when I saw the light, I don't believe I was in heaven, but I think it was right behind the light. I think it was there, but I went back to the situation. In both instances, I came back to this reality, but I believe there's other realities too. And some people say, "Oh, this is just an illusion." I don't think it is. I think this is real, but I think that's real also. Well, who's to say that there aren't other dimensions and realms that are out there in this world with different types of physics that can explain it? But I can't explain it. All I know is that for a few short minutes in my life, I was in that other dimension.
Well, that's good enough for me. And I bet it's good enough for the people who are watching and listening that there are there are dimensions. And maybe it takes away the fear some if people are afraid of leaving this physical body, that there's comfort to be had. There's something that listens, there's something that responds. So, Joe, thank you so much for being here and for sharing this very, very personal journey of yours. That it's new for you to be sharing it. And what a privilege that we got to hear you. Thank you so very much. And thank you to all of you who have joined us today. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you very much.
Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, is sponsored by Sensationally Silver, a complete hair care product line created especially for people with hair like ours, naturally gray and white hair. Sensationally Silver products can be found exclusively at sensationallysilver.com.
Sensationally silver, because you are.